morning. Wonderful to be here with you. What a beautiful setting. I went to another hotel school that's up on a hill and in front of a lake, also very beautiful. But I would say something's... That was a tea. Wonderful. Just in time. Whipping film. I went to Cornell, and Cornell has been a life-transforming experience for me in a single generation, and I'm very grateful for that. You may not know, I'm very honored to be on the same panel with Tony Chi. Tony and I actually knew each other from high school, okay, going back about 45 years. And we grew up in a Lower East Side neighborhood that's kind of cool and hip today, but it was downright dangerous at the time that we lived there. And the chances are, I mean, we already beat the odds sort of coming out of that neighborhood alive, and then have gone on to wonderful education and developed wonderful careers. And then two of us being here, speaking at a Swiss hotel school, it's quite an honor. So I'm going to share some thoughts with you. These are personal thoughts. These are opinions. These are not facts. These are just my thoughts, my perspectives. Even though today for the last decade, by the way, in about 1 week is my 10th year anniversary with leading hotels. Didn't think I would last. But I'm speaking broadly about the hotel industry, okay? And certainly in my work, I'm in the luxury segment, but I'm really looking at the hotel industry as a whole. And unapologetically, my perspective tends to be American. And because that's where I'm based, that's where I grew up and spent most of my life. So take that with a grain of salt that it's more of an American perspective, but I have traveled a little bit and understand the global hotel industry as well. So with that, let's go forward. So I've been in the industry for about 40 years. And as I look back, two things changed the most in the industry that I've been in. One is the ownership of hotels, and second is distribution. Ownership of hotels as to who are the owners, and that's changed in certainly my generation. Started with a little tool called management contracts and separation of ownership and operations. You know, hotel companies used to own hotels. Insurance companies used to own hotels for more of a long-term play to match their assets and liabilities. Today's environment, there's a lot of real estate investment trusts, private equity, a lot of hotel investors in the industry. And I'll talk a little bit about it in terms of the implication. Second is distribution, how a customer makes a hotel reservation, how a customer books a reservation. And that has been somewhat of a profound change in the last four decades. So, ownership of hotels, right? Hospitality asset versus a financial asset. What do I mean by that, right? Factories versus manufacturing. Factories is an asset to produce stuff. But if you're in the factory business, you build, develop, you buy and sell factories. That's what the hotel industry has transformed into. It's almost two different industries, very much related, but very different industries. Hospitality asset is when we look at a hotel and say, this is the place that we deliver hospitality services. It's our expression of hospitality to the guests. If you're in the hotel real estate business, you see each hotel as a financial asset based on the economics, based on the financial returns it produces. You buy and sell. That has had tremendous impact on everything in our business. The service that we deliver, the career paths that we follow or not. It all stems from investment objectives. At leading hotels, still about 85% of our hotels are family-owned and operated. Our chairman's hotel in Zurich, the Boerlock, he's the 6th-generation proprietor of that hotel. He sees the hotel as a family asset in order to deliver hospitality services. For him, it's not about buying and selling hotels. His objective is to maintain his hotel such that he can continue to deliver that service. The financial asset owners sees hotel as a means of producing a financial return, whatever way is the best to drive the return. And a lot of it has to do with their mindset that comes from the holding period. Most of the financial investors, I'm going to say not all, but many of the financial investors sees the holding period as 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years. And any investment that falls out of that investment period, it's not something they're interested in. So in terms of how the assets maintain, whether you continuously do renovation, whether you train your people, these are all very different objectives for them and mindset. So what it boils down to, everything is, who's funding everything that we do? Hotel business used to be fairly well vertically integrated. The hotel company owned the asset, they run the operating business, they own the brand, they own the distribution, they own the experiences that they create for the customers. Today, that's not quite the case. And, it's not all necessarily good or bad as it is what is. Certainly the new owners have brought in a lot of capital in the industry, and that provided a lot of job opportunities for all of us as professionals. But I never thought my career would outlast a company. That was the first time that occurred to me. I thought I would join a hotel company and maybe even spend my entire career with the company, and then with all the various mergers and acquisitions that's gone on. So this particular change in our industry, I think, has had a huge impact on every aspect of our business. The second area is distribution. Okay? If I go way back in distribution, Joseph and Mary did not have a confirmed reservation at the inn, and they were turned away. Okay? That's how far back reservation goes. But I won't go that far. I'll start with the toll-free calls. Right? If you look back into probably the 60s and 70s, if a consumer wants to make a hotel reservation, you dial a number, be Hilton, Sheraton, Hyatt, Westin, various brands, and you call, and they will give you availability and rates, and quite often the rates don't change very much. Matter of fact, hotel companies used to have something called the printed tariff. Can you imagine having your rates printed? Now it changes hourly. So that's how you find if you can book a hotel room. And if you want a comparison shop, you call different companies. Companies like AAA used to have directories, so you have a sense of what hotels there are in the city. Or you can call a travel agent. Certainly they will go to these hotel index and all, so they can look up what hotels may be available. It was a cumbersome task. Who's sitting in front of the screen for the toll-free number is a company representative of that brand selling to you, the consumer, about that hotel. They know the rates, they know the inventory, they know the features. Then came GDS, the global distribution systems of airlines. Right? They used to sell airline tickets. They say, hey, we can sell hotel rooms too. What's changed here is that they put rates, inventory, features of the hotels in front of a travel agent. Now, travel agent is still a professional salesperson who is selling to their clients. It was fairly well aligned because travel agent used to get a commission based on the rates that they sell. They were more interested in rates and availability than comparison shop because the consumers couldn't comparison shop. They can call other travel agents, but that would just be cumbersome. Because everybody knows these are the fixed rates that's available. Occasionally there'll be wholesalers involved and various discounts and all that. But who sits in front of the screen is still a professional selling to consumers. Probably the biggest change came with internet. And that was about late 90s and early 2000s. Internet changed the game. Put price transparency in front of everyone, all the consumers. Now you can look up who has availability at what rates. You can comparison shop very easily. Sometimes you comparison shop and then call the travel agent. In many respects, this is the democratization of hotel distribution. It's bound to come because anything that's cumbersome, anything that's not friendly to a consumer, somebody's going to find a way to disrupt it. And indeed, internet has. So in my mind, it's all about who's sitting in front of the screen. And I think hotel companies are still slow to react because for so long, our systems, our CRS systems, have been built for a B2B orientation. Right? Today, the information we put out is really a B2C marketing. And we're still adjusting to that. Some companies have done better than others. So these are the two, I would say, the major changes in my 40-year career. So as I ponder, as I look forward, can I see what would I see in the next 40 years? Right? The reality as I look at it is that I could not have seen 40 years ago what the world looks like today in the hotel business, and there's no way I can see 40 years out. But I do have some opinions about what some of the changes may be in terms of coming up. And I thought I'd share some of that with you. So this is where I was with 6,000 of my closest friends in travel industry at the Bellagio. But the point is not about the picture. The point is hotels are not demand generators. Hotels are simply demand accommodators. And this is an important fundamental fact about our business. Now, don't ever make sweeping statements, right? Yes, some hotels will claim that they are demand generators because they are so wonderful people want to go and stay there just to stay there, okay? There may be a few exceptions, I grant you that. But ultimately, it's about people wanting to travel to somewhere that's not their home and they need accommodations. So fundamentally, this is important because, you know, there's a movie called Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. It's not quite true. We've learned that, or we have not learned that yet. We keep building them. But if so, why is this important? Well, if we're trying to predict the future and our product is not the demand generator, then we have to look elsewhere. So what are the demand generators, and therefore trying to look at where our industry may go? It doesn't even bother me anymore. Yeah, be prepared, Tony. If we fundamentally look at demand for hotel rooms, is business or leisure? Yeah, I know there's other reasons, but fundamentally business and leisure, right? Business may be corporate meetings, conventions, you know, sales trip, training, whatever it may be, business-related travel. And then there's leisure-related travel. Sometimes they overlap, but fundamentally these are the two forces which drives demand, okay? So, that's good, there's an echo in here. I'm going to put aside leisure for a second. We know the world is getting wealthier. People enjoy traveling on a leisure basis, and it will expand. Okay, it will continue to expand. But let me put that aside for 1 second. That it's going to expand, and I'll come back a little bit. From my perspective, where demand is going is founded on a couple of fundamental economic principles. I know economics was not necessarily my favorite because, the topic itself is quite interesting. I mean, maybe it's the way it's taught or whatever, but as I apply them in business, I actually find economics to be quite interesting. The first one is just economy of scale, critical mass, right? Efficiencies and division of labor, which quite often leads to outsourcing, right? That's something that's underway. Sometimes it accelerates, sometimes it slows down a little bit, but we see that continually happening in all the economies. And then the second one is consumer surplus. You may not remember what consumer surplus is. I'm going to give you a very quick lesson on consumer surplus if you don't remember. It's about capturing consumer surplus, right? So here's my view of the business world. I believe employment as we know it today is going to shrink significantly. It's going to be replaced by another form of contribution, another form of labor. It's already happening, but I think it will accelerate. If you look at the employment that exists today, my own prediction is 25-30% of that will evolve into something else, more like an independent contractor. It's not a form of employment between an employer and an employee. Employees, as we know them today, not all of them, many of them will work for themselves, contributing what they have to contribute to companies on an independent contractor basis. What do I say that? Well, I see work today, more and more of our work is changing into project works versus what I would classify as operations work, sort of the daily routine. The daily routine, many of those are being replaced, whether it be artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. Many of the work as we see it today are being replaced. However, new work is being created. These tends to be IT-related projects. Sometimes it's not even IT-related. They're projects. People come together to put something, create something, whether it be 3 months, whether it be 2 years, and then they disband onto something else. That's the nature of work that I see is coming. You can call it millennials, but I think it's not just in terms of people today. I think people have always enjoyed working for themselves. They don't always have the means to do it. Today with technology, they're better able to do that and be their own boss. And they're enjoying that work. You hear some of the millennials will call something they do side hustles. These are hobbies that they do. These are things that they can perhaps make a little money, but I see more and more of that growing into full hustle. Right? For us in the 70s, that may be completely something different. It's a dance, but anyway. So I think there will be platforms created to accommodate this. Companies with needs will post, I need project work, this type, this is a project, these are the kind of people, and people will post their own qualifications. They will be matched up, and people come together, do certain projects, they'll be rated. And millennials, younger generation, it doesn't have to be millennials. They can work for 6 months on a project, take 3 months off, work again. If you notice, companies more and more do not want permanent cost. More and more companies are being demanded to fluctuate their cost along with their revenue. Right? Today, it's accomplished by mass layoffs, plant closures, etc. Going into the future, it'll be much more flexible, and people are in it with the whole understanding is this is a short-term engagement. And it's perfectly fine. They get paid based on that short-term engagements, and companies don't have any illusions about we're hiring these people on a permanent basis. This is the nature of work that's changing. That's going to fundamentally change business travel. If you think about business travel today, you look at all the chain brands, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, Westin, Hyatt, Sheraton, Hilton, Accor, on and on. A big portion of their business is business travelers. Business travelers have one thing in common. They're reimbursed by their companies. When business travelers are traveling on their own money, that's going to be a fundamental shift because it's not going to be reimbursable expense, and they're going to look at that very differently. I think that's going to be a fundamental shift in terms of business demand for business hotels. Consumer surplus, right? I know you've been waiting for this. Consumer surplus, very simple concept. You have a demand line. I cannot draw a line on that screen. You have a demand line. As the prices are higher, the units demand is lower, and as the price goes lower, more demand, right? Very simple concept. So if you set a price at, let's say, $4, there are 6 units of demand. It's a simple concept. We all understand that. The problem with setting a price at $4 is that you have all these people willing to pay more for it. And then if you can lower your price, there's demand down here also. So what companies have been chasing after is, how do I capture this consumer surplus? The people who are willing to pay more. Some companies have used different products. Some companies have used timing. Right? Think about electronic products. They're most expensive when they first come out because there's those early adopters willing to pay more. Right? Demand pricing. The airline seats. It all depends on when you book. The product is the same, but there are other variables that changes the timing in order to capture those who are willing to pay more. There'll always be people willing to pay more. And then also introduce products to fill in the bottom where people are not willing to pay as much and they're willing to compromise. That's a lot of what goes on in business is about capturing consumer surplus. So let's take a look at several industries, how they do that. Airlines, automobiles, and hotels. Okay? Airlines. When we first started, there was one class, Pan Am, Clipper class. People get dressed up to go take a flight. Very few people actually flown. There's no reason to travel. Right? So what did they do? Eventually, business class, right? To accommodate those who are willing to pay more because they're traveling on business, right? The company reimbursement. Then came the first class suites, right? Then there's even private aviation. Lovely. That's to capture those who are willing to pay more with different products. Now, we also go the other end. Whoops. Economy class. But this is economy class with the video screens. Right? And then there's a bargain airlines. Right? Southwest, Ryanair, you name it. Because there are people willing to pay less, but they still want the product. Right? This is capturing consumer surplus. Wait for this. Wait for this. This is coming. Semi-seated economy class. This is coming. This is coming. Okay? Semi-seated. because people are willing to pay a little less and they're willing to be a little bit less comfortable. All right? This is capturing consumer surplus. It's wonderful. It is wonderful. Now, if you look at automobiles, Toyota entered the U.S. market with a Corolla. They went up. They went to Camry, they went to Avalon, and then they introduced Lexus IE L-Class. But they also went a little bit lower with Yaris. The what? Okay. They also have SUVs and trucks and all that. That's not my point to cover Toyota. Man, students. Okay, something you're more familiar with. All right? Marriott started as Marriott. They acquired Renaissance. You know, Renaissance was actually developed by Ramada as their upscale brand. And Renaissance got combined with Stouffer's, which is another hotel company in the U.S., and bought by the Chang family in New World, and then sold it to Marriott. Anyway, now we're talking about history. JW Marriott, and then, of course, they acquired Ritz-Carlton. And then going down, they developed Courtyard Marriott, Fairfield, etc. Again, segmentation to capture different price points. Back to the standing seat again. Look at that. They look so comfortable. So, my view, my prediction, all right, here we go. It's not quite the money slide yet. The money slide comes at the end. My view is that our business, our industry, the great opportunity is in more compact hotel rooms with some with some very large social space. All right. So, I know you think that me being in the luxury, I would pontificate more about the luxury market. The global hotel industry in rooms revenue is roughly $500 billion. It's a pretty big industry. The luxury market is about $60 billion. So it's about 10-12% of the total pie. The overall industry, in my mind, the direction is certainly in terms of growth. I see more about compact hotel rooms. And the design of it is going to be critical, you know, because if you look at the driver of building hotels is square footage. It's about the land that allows a certain FAR, and it's about the construction costs. Everything is about square footage. If we can give consumers a good enough solution, okay, the biggest disruptors in many industries comes from good enough solutions. And consumer finds it and say, I'm happy with what I needed. So my view is going to be looking at cruise ships, how they design the guest room, cabin. There's these things in the U.S. called the tiny homes. They're about 20 square meters. They're 20 square meters. Sometimes they're even on wheels and they be taken from places, right? I think some of this design is going to influence the hotel business. Yotel exists today, right? This is New York City. It's not about the quality of the interior. It's just about the quantity in terms of square footage. Everything inside is very comfortable, more like a business class, first class type of seat, but it's very small. Behind the glass is the shower and the toilets. The bed shifts up so that it becomes more of a sofa. There's a table that folds down. Technology, everything in there. It's about 100 square feet, 10 square meters. Okay? It's about, if you look at a hotel room today, you take a upscale hotel room, it's probably about 40 square meters. This is about a quarter of the size. I think this type of product will be very popular in a large city environment where the hotel rooms are expensive. It may not be quite as popular in some of the smaller rural areas where the hotel rooms may not be as expensive. Now, if you combine this with the changing nature of work, when people become independent contractors and they work for themselves, what are they looking for in a overnight accommodation? They're more likely to be looking for a good enough solution rather than a company reimbursed solution. And I think that's going to be the big shift in demand for the sort of a compact hotel room. Social space, they still want to socialize. They can do pretty much all their work on their laptop. They still want a space where they see other people. But if you look at the space that we can allocate to sort of a social space, if you have a 100-room hotel, if you allocate 10, in my mind, I think square feet. If you allocate 10, 20 square feet per room, you have a fairly large size social space that people can hang out, do work. They don't need to be socializing in their own guest room. It's reallocating the square footage out of the guest room into some of the social space and fundamentally shift the investment requirement for a hotel. If the compact hotel rooms are coming into the market, my sense is going to put a lot of pressure on the upscale, upper upscale. If there's pressure on the upscale, upper upscale, there's going to be pressure on the luxury as well. I think luxury is a little bit better immune in terms of people may not be as price sensitive. In Tokyo, it's called the First Cabin. It's similar to capsule hotels, but I still think people want their own individual space rather than sort of sleeping in capsules one over the other. This one has communal bathrooms. For some, that will work very well. My sense is a lot of people will probably still want sort of private bathrooms. This is about 7 square meters. No. Yeah, 70 square feet. It fundamentally changes the investment. Another prediction in distribution. Today, previously, toll-free numbers, GDS, there's very little opportunity for consumers to find information. Then came internet. We have all the information we need and more. Now all of a sudden we have too much information. My prediction in the distribution world is that it's going to flip. It's going to flip rather than consumers searching. Consumers going to say, here are my criteria. Here's the list of what I'm looking for. Dates, the type of product I'm looking for. Make me an offer. And there'll be platforms set up such that hotel companies looking at that particular individual customer and make an offer to one single customer. Well, not exactly, right? Because you go in Booking.com, you search. It still returns, right? But if you're not on Booking, if the companies are not on the platform, but it takes a long time to search, right? No, it doesn't. Okay, Booking.com is easy. Great. Won't get into that argument. But it is fundamentally, if today you still have to search, companies do not create a single offer for you. Company has an offer for those dates, right? Now, if we get into personalization in terms of some information about the customer that they're willing to share, that flips it around and allows a certain platform to make offers to that particular customer. Another prediction. The independent contractors concept is going to affect the hotel industry as well. You know, today we have mostly employees. Sometimes we outsource. Imagine if you are a housekeeper. You have a set of skills. Today, hotels, we fluctuate our cost based on the shifts, certainly in the U.S. And it's pretty tough on housekeepers to be able to have to adapt to the schedules. So what they do, the chances are they have more than one job in order to make ends meet. I envision that even in areas like housekeeping, they become independent contractors. They offer their services on certain platforms, and companies with housekeeping needs post their needs, and the platform matches them up, or they apply whatever the mechanism is. And if there's a high demand, if you think about from an Uber, Lyft type of services, if there's a high demand, maybe there's a surge pricing for housekeeper, and maybe more are willing to work at a certain price. I see a better balance in terms of price, demand, and supply. Maybe not in the front desk area, but who says front desk don't exist? Right? So I think many areas, engineering, there are many areas where the economy of scale comes into play, such that hotels don't need to have their own departments. I'm not saying that's going to happen to all hotels, but certainly it's going to have an impact in our industry. So now it comes back to leisure travel. If more employees today are able to work as independent contractors, working anywhere allows them to travel, allows them to be wherever they want to be in order to do their work. I see leisure type of properties, particularly near large metropolitan areas, becoming much more popular, because if I got a project to work on for the next 3 days, and instead of working from home, and I choose to be in a more of a leisure destination, and I find myself more productive, I may very well do that and be able to enjoy myself as well as working at the same time. What's that? Unless you work in a team. However, with technology, you don't have to be in the same place, right? You say that, you make that face. We didn't think that we can Skype each other and get things done, but today that happens a lot. How old are you? Never mind.
Never mind.
It's okay. So here's how I see value creation, right? This is the money slide. Most of us work in growing something better, right? Would it be bigger, faster, cheaper, easier, whatever it is? That's our work is about. That's what most companies do, right? However, my view is the extraordinary opportunities, the extraordinary value creation is unlocked in some of the other areas. One is to take something apart. If you look at our hotel industry, it was vertically integrated. Hotel companies have their own design department, construction department, purchasing department, all trying to capture the economy of scale until we realize even the biggest hotel companies don't have the economy of scale. Marriott, Hilton, etc. You look at, they don't even have the scale to have their own CRS. You know, Marriott does today, but I suspect that's going to change very soon. Hilton already changed. When you take things apart, you're able to unlock value creation. That's certainly one area. Flip things around. A lot of times, if you look at what I just mentioned in terms of reversing the distribution, that already exists, certainly in group bookings, RFPs, corporate travel, etc. Asking companies to make an offer rather than going out and searching to see what they are offering to the public. Right? If you flip things around, because if you're in sales, think about how valuable your skills are to the buying companies. If you're the buyers, how valuable you are to a company that's selling stuff. And lastly, it's about putting things together. The ability to put companies together. Well, in the US, if you look at Amazon and Whole Foods, you wouldn't normally think of them as sort of adjacent industries. But there's tremendous synergies that can be created. And there are many, many more examples of it. So my view of the industry, I have concerns. I have concerns that we are very rooted in the past. You know, it's an industry of knowledge. It's about what we know, from the concierge to the general manager. But knowing comes from the past. And if we count on being all we know, then our future is predictable. It's an extrapolation of the past. Ben White talked about yesterday about continuous learning. We're not a great industry when it comes to continuous learning. So I'm delighted to hear Les Roches is looking at in terms of how do we continue to deliver education, maybe in smaller dosage, throughout the career, rather than here's 4 years, you're ready for the next 40 years. That doesn't happen. So these are my thoughts. Not looking for agreement or disagreement, but simply opinions, right? And I think I have 2 minutes left if there's a question or two that I can answer. Yeah, please.
You talked about other media. How much do you think in percentage is that going to affect people staying at hotels at all? Because I know after 9/11, a lot of the companies said we don't want people to travel, and they did a lot of the meetings instead of meeting in one or the other place. They just met on the internet and so on. Do you think, is there a percentage you could put on that, on how much the hotel stays will decrease because of the internet?
So for me, I trust you all heard the question. For me, ever since I started in the industry, there's been talk of video conferencing, replacing meetings, etc. My own view is that hotel industry has actually seen a net gain from technology. Certainly companies are having Skype meetings rather than traveling for some of their internal meetings. I don't think Skype meetings replaces external meetings. A lot of sales missions, a lot of things that go see clients and etc. are not being displaced by technology. Perhaps certainly not the important ones. Maybe the routine, daily, calls, etc. are okay. But I also see new demand created, whether that be training business because of technology, and other areas that I find that it actually is a net gain for the hotel industry. So I'm not concerned about technology reducing that particular demand, because I think there are offsetting ones too. Gentleman from UK, from Bath.
How do you see Airbnb affecting the budget hotel market in the future? Paul Smith from Bath. Thank you.
Great question. Because there's been a lot of conversation down in the industry about Airbnb. I had a conversation with someone, and I think this may be insightful. It depends on whether you see Airbnb as a competitor or a substitute. If you see them as a competitor, you have to be better. If they're a substitute, you have to be different. So I think Airbnb is not one giant product that's the same everywhere. Every market is somewhat different, whether you're in a resort, whether you're in a city, and who the Airbnb offerings are, if they are a substitute for what you have, right, that means they don't do everything you do, but they satisfy a certain aspect of what you do. No, it would not make sense for you to try to compete with them by being like them. You want to be very different than who they are. But if they're a competitor to you, meaning similar offering, then you got to be better than who they are, right? In order to compete. So I think Airbnb is a good thing, certainly for the consumer, and for people who are looking for hotel services, it's not complete enough of a product. For people who are looking for overnight stay, it's a good enough product. Matter of fact, in some places, it's better because it has certain features that hotels do not offer. So it really depends on what kind of Airbnb products you are competing with and who you are. Yep. Airbnb, in terms of the number of offering listings, I think it'll be bigger, but I already see the rate of increase of Airbnb slowing down. Okay, but they'll continue to grow because I think it makes sense, that sharing economy. But what I've watched them over the last 5 years, the rate of increase is slowing down. I mean, they're also reaching a pretty big critical mass. I don't know, 2 million, 2.5 million listings. So anytime, it's like China, right? When you reach a certain economic size, you're not going to continue to grow at 10% a year. Your rate's going to slow down, and I think that's what's happening with Airbnb. I'm already over my time. We'll have more Q&A later on. So thank you all very much.